Now I'm like at a point where I'm just like, I can't even see straight. I'm like, why do I like there's somebody else needs to come in here with fresh eyes. We brought a consultant in to help us. Like we needed that, right? Like we needed somebody to be able to come in to be able to see things with fresh eyes, and that's worth it.
Welcome to Lessons in Leverage, the podcast that takes you behind the scenes of success. We'll help you unlock the secrets of leverage so you can amplify your impact in the world. Here is your host, Spencer Lowe.
Welcome back to another episode of Lessons in Leverage. I am really excited to be joined today by a friend of mine. Her name is Lauren Hong. She's the founder and CEO at Out and About Communications, which is a marketing company that really helps financial services firms. And she has a lot of deep expertise in the financial services space and as a marketer. And so I met Lauren a little while back. She had actually reached out on LinkedIn, was looking for people in the space that I work in. And so I sent her a message, we connected, and as we were just getting to know each other and networking, I realized she has had some really cool experiences. So I wanted to invite her on the podcast. Lauren, thank you for being willing to join us.
Yeah, Spencer, thanks so much for having me. I'm glad to be here and get the conversation going.
Awesome. So I love to start by really going back to before you were an entrepreneur, before you saw the world maybe the way you see it now. What was Lauren like back, prior to Out and About Communications, as you're working in some of your roles previous to that as an employee? Tell me what your mindset was. And, I know that you have a really interesting background from, being in Korea as a teaching assistant to working, in a variety of roles. Tell me a little bit about what that early stage of your life was like. And then we'll get a little bit into what shifted as you started to think about entrepreneurship.
All right. Oh my goodness. So we're going back here. We're winding. So all right. So this is the story. So I grew up in the Midwest from Kansas City, Missouri, and I went to school in Des Moines, Iowa at Drake University. So lots of Midwest experience. That was kind of my world, right? Had an amazing time at Drake and wanted to continue to be challenged. And I applied for a Fulbright grant that fortunately I received and allowed me the opportunity to go to South Korea as a teaching assistant, as you alluded to earlier. So I didn't know anything about Korea. In fact, that's why I wanted to go, because I was like, I just want to be thrown in the deep end and learn something totally new. I didn't even know what kimchi was. I had no idea. I didn't know anything about Korea at all. I didn't know about the food. I didn't know about the culture or the language. So I just was like, I want to be challenged. And that's what happened. So I went to Korea, loved Korean food, learned about the language, the culture, but I honestly felt like a little kid again. Because when you don't know anything, you can't even do things like wash your own clothes with having to Google every word. And then it was even hard to Google those words because phones weren't like they are right now. It was, you're constantly having to learn new things and be put into challenging situations. So my mindset back then was just go into the deep end. I ended up staying in Korea for 3 years. I did the grant for a year, worked at the U.S. Embassy, and I did my master's there in international studies, continued to work at the embassy, their public affairs division. From there, I bounced to Washington, D.C., where I met my husband and worked at a boutique marketing agency that was based in the U.S. but had an international agenda. My mindset at that point was very much of I could either make my world international and I could really learn the language and I can make that my path, or I can deliberately choose a path to come back to the U.S. and say okay, what does that look like? And how do I leverage building that network, right? Networks are key to being able to speed things up to make them quicker or what have you. We could unfold that in a variety of ways. So I intentionally came back to the United States, met my husband, worked at a boutique marketing agency that was based here but had an international agenda. And that work later took us to Boston. I dabbled in entrepreneurship there, but I was really in this what do I want to do with my life, right? Do I want to work for somebody else? Do I want to go after these big name, shiny object kind of brands? I was in my 20s. I didn't know what I wanted to do, or I was trying to figure it out. And at that point, I had this aha moment where I realized that when I was in a flow state of I really just want to be thinking about marketing. I want to be thinking about business growth. I want to be thinking about more ops structure and org. I didn't know the words at the time, but I could just feel that flow. It's when I realized where I want to put my energy for a professional career to be able to move forward. And so that's when I took the leap to be able to start the business that I've got today. At the time, it wasn't where it was. It was me as an entrepreneur getting started. I have a graphic design undergrad, and I was literally like, I always think of the expression from Finding Nemo, like, just keep swimming, just keep swimming. I was like, just go, like, just show up, like, everything's great, even though I was like, just trying to hustle to make it work when I got started. But it was through that energy and output that then, if you fast forward today, we're now going on our 11th year of business. Like, we've got a team of about 30 employees, about 30 team members, not all employees, but employees, contractors mix. We have an amazing set of clients, and like, we've got those org structures and the other things. It was a stepping stone to get to where we are right now. So that's part of the journey from kind of where I began to where I am now.
I love that. There's so many things that I'm excited to go back and kind of dig into a little bit. So, where were you when you actually had that realization? I think so many young people today struggle with this idea of like, I need to know what my plan is, what my path is, what my passion is, what's going to make me happy and feel fulfilled, which is just like, it's hilarious. It's a hilarious goal for like a young person to really know what's going to make you fulfilled. Like, that's a long journey to really find that, in my opinion. And what you need is experience. And so I'm curious, like, how did you clearly were driving forward on things? You were not like sitting around in your parents' house just going like, what will I do? You were taking these actions. You went to school, you went off to Korea. How did taking action get you the clarity that you needed on what you wanted to do?
I'll credit a lot to my husband, honestly. So I've always kind of been like, okay, see opportunity and then just drive towards that, but not necessarily painting the opportunity before I get there. Like, what does success look like 5 years out, 10 years out, more of that business mindset. My husband, he's Navy. He's got strategic planning, like, Lean Six Sigma black belt. Like, he thinks big picture. It's just sort of his approach. And I remember when we first met, we were talking about all these things, like, you're meeting someone, you're like, do I want to spend the rest of my life with this person? Like, what's that all about? You're asking these big picture questions. You don't know what you're supposed to be asking. But you start talking about, like, what does life look like? And we sat down and we started to kind of actually, like, this is going to sound really businessy. And sometimes people are like, who are you guys? And other people are like, tell me, like, I want to know about this. And so we like literally like mapped out, like, what do we want to do? Like, what do the next like 10 years look like for us? Just very big picture, like paragraph, almost like a business plan, like kind of, but it's your life. It's intentional living. And then it was like, okay, so if we're going to break it out down to the next like 5 to 7 years, like big bullet points. And then you get tactical, like things you can really feel today. Like, I want to be able to accomplish this, or I want to lose weight, or I want to do whatever it looks like. And so those gave us some wickets to be able to reduce the shiny object from the rest of the world and to be able to drive towards that. Because what I realized is, even when I was I decided to go on this venture to start the business that I've got today is like, not everybody was behind me, and people want to get behind success. And so if they see success, then oftentimes they want to jump on that ship, but they kind of got to see it before they're going to like applaud it. And so I just had to have this like internal confidence about my own self of like, well, that's great, and I appreciate your opinions. Like, this is the direction that I'm going with that confidence, and then just like go for it. So I think that it was like that intentional shaping around what we didn't have and felt like it was like out of thin air, but like, what's that rock, like that mountain that we're going to climb? And like, what are those, like, what are you gripping onto? And the gripping onto was like those bullets, the 5 to 7 years out, the 3 years kind of thing, 1 year out. So it sounds really businessy, but it like actually helped. Like, it helped me to be like, yeah. So
you stopped, you're in your 20s, you're like chasing the next thing, trying to figure it out as you go, but taking action, and then actually taking that pause with your husband to zoom out and say, all right, what do I really want? Now that I have some experience under my belt, I know what it feels like to do this, to do that, to travel, to experience a different culture, I've given myself actual data to go off of by taking action. But now that
like the data you can get in your 20s, but
sure,
you're going with
version. Yeah.
Leave it to his educated guesses, right? So, but go ahead. Yeah.
That's it. Yeah. But like, if you had no experience, it'd be hard to make any decision. So I think what I'm driving towards here is that if people are at this point where they're trying to still figure out what they want to do at any age, you have to take enough action to get some data to know, like, well, I've had experiences with these things to have some sense of like, I did enjoy this, I didn't enjoy this, or this is my favorite part of that. But then you also have to actually start projecting and planning things out. Like if you don't have an idea of where you'd like to end up, people I think get so fixated on knowing how they're going to get there and they stop. They get paralyzed by how. What job is going to get me there? What title? What timeline exactly? Yeah. Versus like, at some point, my dream life is I want to be working as a digital nomad, or at some point, my dream life is that I really want to be settled down in this place with my family. I want my job to feel this way. And it's like, the more you get to some of those bigger picture things, your brain is able then, it has the scaffolding to start to build the how. And you start being able to prioritize your decisions a little bit differently. Because like, that kind of gets me closer to that bigger vision of what I want to do. So I think people sometimes are missing one or both of those steps. They either haven't really thought through that vision of what they want their life to be like. And all areas of their life, their family, their relationships, their work, their passions and hobbies, their finances. And if you think that out, then now you have actually that golden star, or that sort of, northern star you're working towards. And even if you detour a little bit here or there, you kind of know where you're trying to get back to. So I love that. I think there's so much insight for people in that. So as you did that process, you finally kind of had that northern star, you start driving towards it. What was the trigger pull for, I need to be starting my own business versus continuing to work in these jobs that it sounds like you had some fulfillment in, you got different experience on them. So what really was that inciting event or that moment where you decided, I've got to build this on my own?
So there's like two real things. So one is my dad. When I was younger, he was always like, entrepreneurship's the way to go. Even though he hadn't gone that route, he kind of had, I don't know, planted seeds in me early on that kind of like stuck, right?
He was a journalist, right?
Yeah, he's a journalist, now a professor of journalism. But that's like, he saw a lot of different things, right? To a lot of different people, all of that. So he had planted that seed. And then I also think part of it was like, for better or worse, it was my own ego. I was like, I want to do this. This is a really hard thing. Just like when I went to Korea, I was like, I want to just do this and prove this to myself. And I want to learn, and I just want to like go in the fire and figure it out. And then I think though that ego aside, I also had to say like, it's not going to be perfect. Like it's going to take a while, just like no job's perfect right away, no situation, no whatever. You got to work towards it. So part of this was just like, it's that like keep swimming, like you jump in. I always had this like mindset or mentality of like, you always put on bigger shoes than, you actually can fulfill, like, but you project, right? That like that feeling of growth. And then it kind of like it's a magnet, right? That kind of energy starts to come, and then you're able to kind of grow from there. So I think it was just this idea of like clarity on what I was looking for, but then also like this long-term voice in the back of my head that was like, that's a good path to go. So, and I felt
It sounds like your parents or your upbringing or maybe your natural personality instilled a really important lesson that I think a lot of people miss, because it's come out a few times as you've talked about how you sort of made this decision. And that is this idea of, instead of being result oriented of like, this is the result I need, you were able to take that goal and then get it down to, here's the painful price I have to pay, and I'm going to go enjoy paying that price. So it was like, instead of, I want to be this cultured person that's traveled, that was like, I'm going to go to Korea because I have no idea, because it's hard, because it's painful, because it'll be difficult. And I have confidence that that's going to lead to growth, that then I'll enjoy the outcome. And if you don't get that conviction that doing the hard thing, doing the difficult or challenging thing that allows you to grow will lead to that long-term outcome you want of feeling accomplished or satisfied, then you don't ever do the hard thing. And a lot of people spend so much energy trying to avoid the hard thing, and then they wonder why they haven't ever got where they wanted to be. And so what do you think it was that helped create that in you? Was that more of your upbringing? Was that a personality trait? How did you get that perspective?
I think it was a little bit of all the above. I was thinking back just like earlier before, we kind of got going to this conversation of like kind of that narrative, right? And thinking back to the story of I remember as a kid, my parents wouldn't, like, I always worked for things like I babysat, or I worked at different retail stores or stuff like that. And I remember like wanting certain things. Like it was I wanted this fancy purse one time, and they're like, we're not paying that for that. Like, you got to work for that. And I was like, was like a few $100s. And I was like, that's like a lot of money. Like, I mean, that's a lot of babysitting hours. I'm just going to put it out there, like I remember we had like in our house, we had this attic that was finished. Like it was an attic. It was a playroom at the time. And I remember I wanted to I was like, that's my room. I wanted to move up to that room. I have 2 other brothers, but I was like, that's the biggest room. It's going to be awesome. My parents made me put together, not made, but they offered for me to put together a whole proposal for why I should move up to the attic. I didn't get it. But like, it was just this idea of going through, like working towards something of like, it's like those little confidence builders along the way. And I think part of that maybe helped me realize like, you can do harder things. Like you put yourself out there, like you try a little something harder, like it puts you out of your comfort zone. You put a little bit more of that effort and energy. And that's, I think, where you get the momentum. And then when you do that, you realize you can do things that are harder and harder and harder. And so that's where I think that helps to build the grit and the tenacity that I think is really needed as an entrepreneur to be able to, drive things forward. So it's the overtime story of the cumulative.
Yeah. Yeah, it makes perfect sense. I mean, I think that's such a great parenting lesson because giving your kids opportunities to go through the process, to earn things on their own, to be in touch with what things cost and have to actually reconcile and do the work to get them, to all those little micro lessons that you can give your kids as a parent really do help shape that sense of grit, that sense of work ethic, that sense of ability and confidence, like you said, that then can lead to these bigger outcomes. And so much of why I even started this podcast is because I think if you don't ever get exposed to it, you don't know it exists. And so some of us get lucky and we have great parents and we have great upbringings. We have great situations that allow us to get that idea or start to plant those ideas. Some people just naturally are born with it. I've talked to people who come from horrible circumstances who just, their personality was like they just understood it. And then for some people, it's a hard lesson to learn. But if you can learn it, it unlocks so much to you. I remember as a kid, for me, I wanted an RC car. I was in the same boat. And my parents said, well, you got to pay for it. And I started doing the math and it was like 7 years away. And I'm like, well, wait a second.
I know that.
Like
yeah.
If I want this RC car, I think mine was, about $300-$400. But on the money I had then, and I'm budgeting and they're requiring me to do donations every month out of what I earn and to do some investment saving for myself for the future. And I have to, pay for all my own clothes and everything. And so I'm like, okay, so then like I'm taking this small percentage of what's already a very small income as a 7 or 8, 9-year-old.
Yeah.
And then eventually that's 7 years from now, I get this one thing I want that sounds horrible. So it made me think there's got to be a better way. Like, how could I get that money faster? And then I started a business and mowing lawns. It was like, oh, here's a way I can get more in a shorter amount of time using some leverage. And I had to actually get leverage from my dad in the form of a lawnmower he bought for me to use and allowed me to use, and some training on mowing lawns and some things like that. But if you don't ever get that confidence, you need to have the problem, and you also need to know, oh, I can take a problem and find a new way or a higher leverage way to get that result. As you have worked on your business, I'm sure there's been a pattern that's repeated itself. I'm sure it's not all been roses and sunshine and, easy and everything. What were some of the big moments so far in your business where you were doing something one way and you realized there was a way to either do it significantly better and get more out of your efforts, or to maybe just grow and go to the next level as a leader?
I think one consistent pattern has been this theme of like delegate or die. Because if you try to do everything, you're just gonna like melt. And like that's how businesses grow, and and trusting in your people, in your teams. And then I think with that, like along that same thread, is just like get out of your own way. Like we, just as a recent example, as we've grown, I've really had like my hands like deep into like the workflows and the operations of things, checks and balances, like internal actions that we have that are gone. And I've built it out, and I've done it so many different ways and try to please so many different folks and team members as we've moved forward and take all these lessons learned. Now I'm like at a point where I'm just like, I can't even see straight. I'm like, why do I, like, there's somebody else needs to come in here with fresh eyes. We brought a consultant in to help us. Like we needed that, right? Like we needed somebody to be able to come in, to be able to see things with fresh eyes. And that's worth it. Like I need to recognize where my time's valuable, that's where the seat that I need to be in now, and shed those other actions so that other people can come in and do a much better job and really trust them to be able to take the reins. Because one person, I mean, if the intent is to be a solo entrepreneur, that's a different story. But my intent is always to be able to grow, to be able to create operations, to be able to create systems and teams so that then it can scale. And so that's part of how I guess that's a lesson that's continuously repeated itself.
Yeah, I think that's the most common way people grow their first business is majority through labor leverage. It's a pattern I've seen talking to a lot of entrepreneurs, and it's something that drives to that ego that we have where it's like you want to believe you know the best way, or you want to believe that you can do it the best, or but as you learn to let go of that and trust people and learn also the skills around delegation, because it's not as easy either. It's just here, do it, and then they just do it perfectly. It's like there's a lot of skills that go into that to really get the value out of what they do and hold them accountable and support them where they need it. And all of that balance, once you do that, I mean, that can be a jump from just a few $100,000 in revenue into many millions in revenues, just labor leverage. Even if you don't learn anything else, that's a huge jump because now you can really lead a team. And also it really starts to change your job role. You got at this. What have you noticed as you have had to pull your hands out of some of these things that you either enjoyed doing or thought you had to do? What has shifted for you in terms of some new skills that you have to employ to lead a larger group?
I've had to put, I'll call middle management in place to be able to help to support with mentorship and to be able to help to train the team. I've also put a lot of resources into our onboarding, and we have a pretty legit, a series of trainings and things that folks would be involved with. So they kind of get that first wave in, and then that middle management I think has been really helpful. It's also helped me really focus on more of the big picture vision, seeing trends that are happening out there and manage the bigger relationships. And when I'm able to do that, I'm better able to support the team and be able to, for lack of better words, bring home the bacon, and really be able to help us project and lean in towards our mission, to be able to live that out better and to be able to get a pulse on how we are living that out, how we're not, and to really be able to drive our efforts towards that. So I can just better steer the ship with clarity. And the more that I shed and I delegate the things that, even if it's little things, it takes me 4 hours a month or something like that, if I can shed that, it just creates another 4 hours that I can focus on other things that are going to be able to help the bottom line or the mission for where we're going.
One of the things I've noticed in that transition for a lot of entrepreneurs is it changes your time focus from right now or things I sold last week to what are we doing this week to then what are we doing next week to maybe next month, what's happening over the next year, what's our strategy over the next several years. And as you grow and as you are able to turn into process and systems and delegation, all of these things that must happen on a day-to-day basis, there's no one else who's going to come up with the plan for next year. There's no one else who's going to figure out the larger vision. And so you have to have time for that. There are other people who can come in and do the delivery and some of the sales or the marketing, some of the operations, but there's no one else that really can choose the direction, the strategy for the business. Was that an adjustment for you, kind of spending more time on that, or have you found that just to be exciting and fulfilling? And in what ways has that been a learning process for you?
I've been able to better keep my finger on the pulse of what's going on, because sometimes, as we were going through, it was okay, now I'm going to wear this hat. I'm going to wear this hat. It's just part of growth. You just wear different hats. But it's been it feels fulfilling to be able to sit in a seat that you don't have to play musical chairs as much. One of the things that I really enjoy doing on the strategy side, and whenever we do a Net Promoter Score for our employees as well as for our clients, but our Net Promoter Score for our, they call it ENPS. For our team, one of the feedback points is the team always enjoys and feels being empowered by the fact that we often share what's going on in the business. Not the spreadsheets of every single detail on the financial side, but the big picture for where we're going. So monthly, actually, we have ours tomorrow. We have what we call our State of the Unions, actually pulled us from another one of our clients. But it's an hour-long meeting where we go through, we always do gratitude at the beginning of our meetings. Everyone does a round of gratitude, something they're grateful for the week. And then we go right into the business stuff. So it's okay, big picture, where are we going? What are we doing? Are we on track? Are we off track? Just very, very high level. And then we go into some of our major operational projects that we're working on, or it could be stuff that we're working on to better the business. And then at the end, we always focus on a value of the month, like what we're focused on. We talk through it, that sort of thing. And then like awards, anniversaries, that sort of component. And I think that repetitive updates and sharing what's going on helps me to make sure that I'm communicating with the team, the strategy component, not just like a one time a year kind of thing, but it also is a reminder of like this stuff's in my head all the time, but everybody else is really focused on their own roles. And so it just continuously like points us towards being north. So I just kind of share that as a point of it's exciting, but being able to be in that seat more consistently helps me to like truly be in that seat that I'm reporting on that monthly basis to the team at large, so that we can all align our efforts to where we're going. So
there's massive leverage in clarity. And I can't remember who I've heard a lot of different statements I liked, but one person just said something like clarity is speed, clarity is power. And I was like, I thought a lot about that. I heard another person who said clarity is currency. And there's a lot of people who do differently because clarity is so hard. And the bigger the organization gets, the harder clarity is. And so these types of practices are super high leverage because, yeah, it's an hour out of your month for you and for everyone on your teams. It's a lot of man hours, yet it's so valuable to both morale, understanding what's going on, just feeling like they're valued, they are up to date, they know what's going on. And if you want people to be able to contribute towards the things that are going to take you where you want to go, they have to understand what that means. And there's a really good book that we read as a leadership team called The Advantage. And he repeats this concept of like clarity and then repeating clarity and then more clarity and like more and more. And so the bigger the organization gets, these communication patterns and skills become more and more important because you're trying to steer a bigger and bigger ship. And if you are trying to steer it with 7 different little rudders in the thing steering in their own direction, like you're not going to get anywhere. You need this one big clear anchor of a message that everyone knows and understands. And so I love that advice. I think that's so useful. We've seen that, certainly the same thing. And everything you can do that finds that like another way to be clearer, another way to let people be more bought in and involved in the process, another way to let everyone see and understand the goals and pursue them. I mean, that's so powerful.
it's so helpful. And I think that the team individually and at large really appreciates that clarity. And I always tell folks like, this is the train that we're on, just so you know where we're going, what our destination is, which is pointing towards our mission statement. But then like it gives those stops along the way, just from a numbers perspective of where we're at and where we're going. And honestly, if we're off track too, then there's transparency. Like people know if we're off track and why we put a pause on certain things or why we're asking folks to lean in more or, there's shifts. So it provides that. And there's that constant like, okay, where are we going and why are we going there? So, yeah.
That's a great point. I think sometimes leaders think that their job is to sugarcoat and like be the message of hope and inspiration. And there's certainly that's a part of it. But there is a real need for trust, and you're not going to have the trust of your people if you don't also share the struggles, the difficulties, be transparent about things that are navigating. A big thing that I try to do each month when we meet is, here's what I got. Here's what I'm learning from. Because if you want a culture where people accept responsibility, if you want a culture where people learn from their mistakes, you have to model that from the top down. And so you can't have this illusion of like, oh, they need to believe I'm perfect or that I'm getting it all right. They don't. They know you're not perfect. Nobody's expecting that. And so when you just own those mistakes or missteps, you share them, you're transparent, you give a clearer vision, then everyone trusts you, and then the whole team can perform better.
100%. Yep. I love that.
When you think about kind of, where you're at today and you look over the last 11 years, that's a long time to be in business. Most businesses do not make it 11 years. So congratulations. That is a huge accomplishment. And when you look at that and you think about some of these patterns that we've touched on of, the different hard things you've went through, is there any one moment or period of time that you felt shaped you the most, where you thought, this really was sort of a culminating moment for me? I know there's probably a lot, but is there any one that sticks out in your mind?
Yeah. When we were about 3 years into the business, I had started to bring on other team members because I was like, I'm not the best person to do this, and there's other people who can do it a lot better. But I remember we were trying to figure ourselves out, just like an individual's trying to figure themselves out. Like, who am I? Who's our target market? How do we want to show up in the market? All these kinds of things. We had worked with a wealth management firm, and we had taken on other wealth management firms at that point, or really a lot in financial services. And at the time, I also had a manager that was on the team that came from a wealth management, like marketing background. And I had some other people kind of in that world. And I realized, like, we did a really good job for this client. Like, it wasn't just like we did a good job and we thought we did a good job. It's like they just kept wanting more of our support. I was like, and I started to see, like, there's an opportunity here. The first when we started, I thought, honestly, we were going to go after like restaurants, and I didn't know where we were going to go. We weren't sure. But I started to see this opportunity in this financial services space. And I was like, okay, I have a creative background. I see that there's an opportunity in this market. And there's not only an opportunity to like come in to support it and there's a need, but we can really mix it up creatively. And that seems like a really fun, going back to that challenge thing, a really fun, like, that's a really hard challenge. Bring it, like, kind of thing. And so it was kind of at that where we went from like, who are we, to then starting to define who we're as a business. And it was probably, about year 3, we started to really like put our heels in and say, financial services is going to be our target. Like, that's who we're going to go after. We started to actually like learn the jargon, learn the compliance regulations, all the things, as you know, that go with it, and started to really like lean into that community. And, you know, it's like one of those things, just like any marketing 101, like you define your target clearly, understand the pain points, can service those, build that reputation. Like, you build it, they will come. And so it kind of just took flight from there. So I think it was like that eye-opening moment of like, there's an opportunity, let's go after it. And we had something that was of need, like was needed and of interest to that market. So I think that was a turning point for us as we really figured out like, oh, this is how we want to show up and this is who we are. And we stuck with that.
I think that's such an important lesson, because a lot of businesses struggle when they are so focused on who they want to be. It's kind of like the person who's like, I want to succeed in life, but it's only doing this one thing I'm passionate about. And it's not that that's impossible. You can have a really clear vision that's like, this is who I am, is what I want to be, and I want the whole world to bend around me. And some people do. And those are the world benders. Those are the Steve Jobs and the visionary leaders that are just like, they get everything to bend around the way they see things.
Yeah.
That's a very small percentage of people. And the sacrifices required to be that person are immense. And so most of the time in the market, there's this opening of the eyes, I think, for every entrepreneur, where you've been successful to some degree because of different things you've done, but you kind of clue in and you're like, oh, there's an area here where we really understand our customer, or where we have deep expertise, or where the problem, we can really focus on this problem. We have the right message, and all the little building blocks come together. And then you see a lot more clearly what that offer can look like and how you can delight that customer. And then it really grows a lot faster, because that messaging is clearer and your understanding is clear. And so even for us, we've always been focused on our people, our employees. It has to come back to a need in the market. If we're not solving this like need in the market, like, it doesn't matter how passionate we are about our thing, our product, or service. And so I love that story you shared, because as you guys really saw that you had not just done a good job or even a great job, but you had built a relationship with a client in such a way that it was a long-term relationship. They were coming to you, they're asking for more help. It was like you were the answer for them. You sort of like, they were starving in the desert and you were the food, like that experience is very different than like, oh, I had 100 restaurants to choose from and you served a good meal. Yeah. And I'm going to choose a different one next week, and no hard, like, you were great. And so a lot of people struggle to find that. When was it? You said it was about 3 years in for you?
Yeah. So, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, so at about 3 years in, once you realize that, what shifted? So you're 3 years in, that aha moment happens. What did that change for your strategy? In what ways did you start to leverage that to then either accelerate growth or do things differently now that you had that clarity?
Yeah, like external positioning, like how we our messaging on our website, our leave behind, it changed our operations, it changed who we hired. It changed our training internally. It's impacted like where we spend our time in the beginning. I was just like, I'm going everywhere. I was literally out and about. I was like, I mean, all the time I was building relationships. I didn't know where I was going. A lot of times, frankly, I wasted a lot of time innocently, but it was just like, I was just trying to like figure it out. And so I was going to a lot of all kinds of stuff. Networking event, I'm going to go check it out. I'm going to learn. But then I could actually really, really focus my time and my energy. When I started to be able to do that, and then I was able to really start to put those differentiators out there, that's where it started to like, I think, make a difference, because it's just my efforts were more concentrated and they weren't as diluted.
Wow, what a great way of saying that. I mean, concentrated efforts over diluted efforts. It's such a great summary of everything we just talked about. Well, as you look at that and you think about that skill, I tend to think that entrepreneurship is more about what you just described than it is whatever the thing is that people do. So in other words, like the best entrepreneurs are more married to that process of finding the market need and figuring out and then delighting the customer and building the systems and all that. But then some people get to a point where they go, okay, now I'm comfortable. I don't want to do that anymore. And then those businesses will either stay lifestyle businesses, stop growing, maybe they'll die off, or the market shifts and they get disrupted. And if you're always sort of willing or excited or happy to go back to that stage of, well, now that the market has moved, where is that niche? What is our new messaging? What is our new value proposition to the customer, and really going and adjusting that, then you don't have to worry about change. And a lot of people right now are pretty worried, especially knowledge workers, marketers, anyone that all really white collar knowledge work jobs has some amount of fear from the people I talk to about AI and what it could represent as it keeps getting better and better, and the ways that could disrupt very significantly some of these marketplaces where, like, in the past, maybe our job was really, with one of my companies, maybe our job was totally dependent on just we had specialized knowledge. Well, now there's not going to be any barrier to someone just talking to AI and getting access to specialized knowledge. So what is our real offering to the client now compared to AI or with AI or implementing and using AI? Like, what does that look like? And so you go right back to this idea of, all right, whole new marketplace, and where do I need to reposition? How are you thinking about AI in those terms? Is it something you see complementing your business, accelerating your business? Is it something that could disrupt? And where are your thoughts around that as a kind of a disruptive technology?
I'm not scared by it. I'm excited by it. I think that we're as just like a world trying to figure out AI right now because there's so many things AI related that are just popping up. But like when I have clients that tell me like, you guys like really listen to what was happening inside of our company, and you're able to pin that so we could show up externally. That's not something that AI can do right now. Like to be able to kind of pull out those conversations, to figure out the positioning, and then to be able to position something, maybe components of the implementation. And that's where we're utilizing it. So for example, with like images, we're using AI to be able to upload images to, white background, it polish the look up a little bit more, speed up, time that it would have taken on other things. We use AI for audio transcriptions and other tools like that, where it's going to help us to be more efficient. But there's so many of those tools out there that I think that like, one, there's if you're to invest in a bunch of them, there's like ongoing cost barriers. You got to train people on how to use them. There's all these other leverages to get in the way. So I think it's being able to pluck out the ones where they're going to help to speed up your workflow efficiency, and then not being afraid of it, but understanding that like legalities, compliance, all these things haven't caught up with it. And so just using them smartly and just backing yourself up, I think, at the end of the day. So
that's such a really good insight. And it's actually a fresh perspective in some ways from some that past guests have shared that I think, it made me think of clients that hire us today. And one of my knowledge businesses, they hire us even though they have the people on their team that can do the work that we do. And when you think about that, and you think about the conversations in the sales process where we're transparent about, look, this is all the stuff we can do to accelerate your results. These are all things you have competency for already. So if you'd rather do them in-house, it's obviously going to cost you less. These are some of the ways we could just bring the more unique propositions to you. And yet, in many cases, they're willing to pay a lot of money because they need people to own it. They need people to see it all the way through. They need someone who can say, I know what needs to be focused on. I'll go in a very noisy corporate environment. I'll go get the attention of the people I need to get the attention of and get the answers from them I need, then move this project forward. And humans are messy. And one thing that I'm very curious to see what happens is, like, even if AI gets to the point where it can be that proactive and can reach out and all these things, will people just deprioritize it the way that they ignore kind of automated notifications today versus someone reaching out? Like an automated Slack message we send out, a lot of our people will ignore. A Slack message from your manager, they're less likely to ignore. They said the same thing. It was the same information. One automatically went out, hey, this is something you got to get done. The other one was from a manager, and it's like, that's a person, and I care about what they think of me. And so there are some really interesting dynamics around this that I think you're going to play out. And so even if AI can fully replace certain businesses, it'll be interesting to see if it does, because of exactly what you described, this idea that your ability to drive it forward, pull the right things out, get the result, that's still going to be valuable for quite a while, I think.
Yeah, I think it will too. I mean, we work with a lot of wealth management firms, and this robo-advisor kind of concept came up, which is, it's shown up in a lot of different ways, but there's a lot of fear at the time, is it going to take over jobs? Like at the time, I'm talking like 5-ish, 8 years ago, but even today, right? But like that human touch, like that trust, as we were alluding to earlier, like that is something that I mean, I can't imagine technology taking over a certain level of the human trust that people have with each other. So, I mean, maybe you have components for automation, or you can trust in systems to be able to lean into it. But like you said, people are messy, right? So, yeah.
Yeah, and I've been working with our team a lot on just this concept of, if we assume that in the future all technical skills are going to be commoditized, and so all of the specialized knowledge AI will be better than us at, then we need to double down on our soft skills, on our communication skills, on our influence skills, on our ability to help people deal with change, because technology is accelerating at a pace where it's already a whirlwind. There's new tools every day. People they're intimidated, they're stressed, they're annoyed to have to learn a new tool. And so even if the best tool in the world is out there, getting people to understand it, adopt it, et cetera, is going to be an entire field. And I think a lot of the consultancies of today, in the next iteration, if we sort of just look one full iteration forward, I think they will, maybe some of the specialized technical aspects will be commoditized by AI, but they will have an increased value in owning outcomes and managing people and helping with change management and teaching, mentoring, and all of these other aspects that come up in a project that are the really deeply human part. And in a world where technology potentially, 10, 15, 20, who knows how many years out, could be more prolific, AI could be more prolific than humanity. A lot of things that are scarce today won't be scarce, but what might be scarce is humanity. And so there might be this longing for true humanity, even if AI can look and feel human. I was just at the Sphere in Vegas this weekend, and people were having conversations with these Aura robots, humanoid robots, that felt barely human. And yet, again, I think there's that gap of trust of, you look like a human, you sound like a human, there's some human-like things. But even if you were really convincing, if I know that you're not a human, that we're not exactly the same, there's a little bit of a gap in trust of, like, you don't have the same risks I have. If your arm gets cut off, you can just put a new one on. Like, it's different. There's a different level of, like, your experience is not my experience in some ways. And so I am very fascinated to see how that plays out as technology does improve and get better in this space, and to see what opportunities that opens for us as humans, even if we're inferior knowledge-wise. What will be those opportunities for us to really thrive in the marketplace? I'm very, very curious to see how that plays out.
Yeah.
So as you're looking forward, obviously AI is something that's exciting. Is there anything else that you're really excited about? What are you guys focused on? What does the next few years look like for you? And in what ways, if you're just sharing a message, what would you want our listeners to know? Maybe they're in financial services and they want to reach out to you, or maybe they're interested in some of the causes and things you're interested in. What would you want to share with our audience before we wrap up?
So for us, if we look ahead, we're really focused on just really being that outstanding leader, marketing leader in the financial services realm. And so for us, it's just really, it's deepening our roots in that space. And that's through relationships, that's through partnerships, it's through just building out our team, our own knowledge base. And that's really fun. And so if I were to look ahead, one of the things I continuously and always am excited about is just our current client engagements and how they're growing and shaping so we can continuously lean in to better support them, but also these new challenges because we have the benefit in this consultancy space to be able to really look under the hood. And that continuously brightens the light that we're able to shine for our clients because you see a lot. And you see a lot at all different stages of growth. And so that's a really powerful component that I'm excited to continue to shape out and deepen as we move forward. I think that, for folks that are listening, I think a takeaway for us is just if there's marketing questions, support, we're here, of course, to be able to help out. We've got a great webinar. We've actually been running an awesome webinar series the last few quarters. And so happy to share that as that comes up with folks and just things like that. So we just want to continue and to be valuable, support this network and continue to lean in. So
awesome. Well, Lauren, it's been wonderful having you. Thanks so much for taking some time and I wish you nothing but success.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you for the opportunity to share a bit more.
Alrighty. Hey, before you go, I have a small request. Our mission is to empower as many people as possible to maximize their potential through the power of leverage. Could you help us in this mission by leaving a review on iTunes, Spotify, or YouTube? And if you know just one person who would benefit from today's episode, would you please share it with them? Your support means the world to us, and we are thrilled to have you in the community. Thank you for being a part of our journey and helping us grow. You can find show notes for today's show and past shows at lessonsinleverage.com, which also has links to connect with me personally and connect with our various podcast channels across your favorite social networks. A big thanks to Solve.cloud, who sponsored this episode. They're a group of expert consultants that help SaaS and financial services companies to implement, optimize, and manage Salesforce.com. They can help you with custom integration solutions and are helping customers to implement some of the most important generative AI technologies. You can find them at solved.cloud. That's SOLVD.cloud is the URL. Thanks again, and we'll talk soon.